Every single second, 11 million pieces of sensory information hit your nervous system. Your conscious mind processes roughly 50. The rest, the overwhelming screaming majority, gets silenced before you ever know it existed. And the part that disturbs most neuroscientists isn't the filtering. It's that your brain then invents what it thinks should fill the gaps. You are not watching reality. You are watching a reconstruction, assembled in the dark by an organ that has every reason to lie to you. There's an idea most of us absorbed so early we forgot we learned it. The idea is simple. Perception is passive. Light lands on the eye, sound enters the ear, and the brain receives these signals like a projector receiving film. Clean, direct, a faithful copy of the outside world delivered in real time. And every piece of that feels right. It genuinely seems like you open your eyes and the world is just there, fully formed, waiting for you. But over the last 2 decades, a convergence of neuroscience, physics, and evolutionary biology has chipped away at this picture, not with one dramatic finding, more like a slow accumulation of uncomfortable details. Small things, a timing discrepancy here, a visual fabrication there, an experiment where people looked straight at something and literally could not see it. None of these on their own collapse the conventional view, but taken together they outline something harder to dismiss. The possibility that what you experience as the world is actually a curated internal broadcast, assembled on a delay and shaped far more by your brain's expectations than by what's physically in front of you. This isn't a metaphor, and I want to show you exactly how deep it goes. Here's something you've almost certainly experienced but never thought about. You glance at a clock, one with a ticking second hand, and for a fraction of a moment, the hand appears frozen, stuck, like time briefly paused. Then it ticks normally. The whole thing lasts less than a second, and you forget about it immediately. That's called chronostasis. And here's what's actually happening. When your eyes jump to a new target, a movement called a saccade, your brain briefly goes blind, not dim, blind. Visual processing shuts off for the duration of the eye movement, so you don't experience a sickening blur. But that leaves a gap in your visual timeline, a missing frame. So the brain does something elegant and slightly terrifying. It takes the first image you see after the eye movement and pastes it backward in time, covering the gap. The second hand looks frozen because your brain retroactively inserted a still image into a moment where there was no image at all. You didn't observe a stopped clock. Your brain fabricated a stopped clock and slid it into your experience as though it had always been there. This happens roughly 150,000 times a day. Every saccade, every glance, and most people live 80 years without once questioning the integrity of a single frame. Microhook. That's a small example, almost charming, right? The brain smoothing over a tiny glitch. But the same mechanism, prediction, deletion, fabrication, operates at a scale that's much harder to sit with comfortably. Let's talk about what your senses actually have access to and how violently that narrows before it reaches consciousness. Start with light. The electromagnetic spectrum stretches across a range so vast that if you laid it out as a ruler going from here to the edge of the observable universe, the part your eyes can detect would be thinner than a single bacterium on that ruler. Visible light, every sunset, every face, every color you've ever seen, occupies approximately 0.0035% of the spectrum. That's not a rough estimate. That's the physics. Right now in the room you're sitting in, there is infrared radiation pouring off your own body. Radio waves from cell towers are threading through your skull. Ultraviolet light is bouncing off surfaces around you. Cosmic microwave background radiation, the afterglow of the Big Bang itself, passes through this room at every moment. You are immersed in it, and you perceive none of it, not because your brain is failing, because it was never built to. And that's just one sensory channel. Zoom out. The entire category of things your instruments can detect, photons, electrons, protons, all ordinary matter, represents roughly 5% of the total mass energy content of the universe. The other 95% consists of dark matter and dark energy, substances so fundamentally different from anything in human experience that they pass through ordinary matter undetected. We know they exist only because galaxies behave gravitationally as if there's far more mass present than anything we can see. Here's the unsettling math. You are biologically equipped to perceive a fraction of a fraction, a thin slice of the 5%, filtered further by a brain that throws away most of what arrives. But fine, maybe that's just an engineering constraint. Brains can't process everything. Makes sense to prioritize. The deeper issue comes when you ask, what does the brain do with the scraps it keeps? The wavelength 580 nanometers has no yellowness. It's an oscillation of electromagnetic energy at a particular frequency. Yellow is a label your visual cortex generates in response to that frequency, a neurological event occurring inside your skull. If a different species encounters the same wavelength, it may produce an entirely different experience, or no conscious experience at all. The mantis shrimp, with 16 types of photoreceptor to our 3, likely doesn't see more colors. Its brain processes wavelength information in a fundamentally alien way, one we can describe mathematically but cannot imagine from the inside. Color is not a property of the world. It's a property of your particular nervous system's translation protocol. Same goes for sound. A compression wave at 440 Hz isn't A above middle C until a brain interprets it. Texture, temperature, taste, every quality you attribute to the external world is generated internally. Philosopher John Locke drew this distinction in the 1600s. Primary qualities like shape and motion may belong to objects, but secondary qualities, color, sound, flavor, are inventions of perception. 300 years later, neuroscience has confirmed him, and in some ways gone further. So if perception isn't a camera, then what is it? The dominant framework in modern neuroscience is called predictive processing, and the person most responsible for formalizing it is Carl Friston, a neuroscientist at University College London, who developed something called the free energy principle. Here's the core idea. Stripped of the math, your brain doesn't wait around for sensory signals and then react. It runs ahead. At every level of the neural hierarchy, from the earliest sensory relays to the highest abstract reasoning centers, the brain generates predictions about what input should arrive next. Sensory data doesn't flow up into the brain so much as prediction errors flow up to correct an already running model. Think of it like this. Imagine a cartographer who draws a map of a city before visiting it, based on satellite data, historical records, and educated guesses. Then she walks the streets and notes only the differences between her map and what she sees. She doesn't redraw the map from scratch. She updates it, and over time, if the map gets good enough, she barely needs to look at the streets at all. That's your brain. The map is perception, the streets are sensory data, and here's what keeps neuroscientists up at night. When the map is good enough, the brain actually reduces its attention to the incoming data. It trusts its own model. You experience the map, not the territory. This is where the phrase controlled hallucination enters the picture. Anil Seth, a cognitive neuroscientist at the University of Sussex, puts it starkly. Perception is a kind of hallucination that happens to be constrained by sensory input. When the constraint is tight, when there's rich, clear data from the world, the hallucination tracks reality closely. When the constraint loosens, in a dark room, during sensory deprivation, at the edge of sleep, the hallucination drifts. You start seeing faces and shadows, hearing your name in white noise, but the process generating both experiences is identical. The machinery doesn't switch modes. There is no clean dividing line between seeing and imagining. Your visual cortex activates in nearly the same patterns during vivid mental imagery as during actual sight. During dreams, the same regions that process waking vision light up, generating scenes, faces, motion, all without a single photon entering the eye. You've been hallucinating nightly for your entire life. The only reason you call daytime experience real is that sensory data happens to agree with the hallucination enough to keep the label. This one is precise and measurable. Visual signals take between 150 and 250 milliseconds to travel from retina to conscious awareness. That quarter second doesn't sound like much, but in that interval, your brain has already pre-rendered a model of the scene, compared it against the incoming signal, resolved discrepancies, and produced a finished image. And the finished image isn't where the object actually was when the light hit your eye. If something is moving, a car, a bird, a hand reaching toward you, the brain pushes the perceived position slightly forward in time to where it calculates the object probably is now, at the moment you become aware of it. This is called flash lag compensation. It's why you can catch a ball. Your conscious visual experience is literally depicting a place the object hasn't occupied yet, based on a trajectory prediction. You're seeing a mix of the immediate past and the predicted near future composited together, presented as the present. And it works so seamlessly that the edit is invisible. But here's where something genuinely strange emerges. A 2025 study published in Science pinpointed the gatekeeper. Researchers at Beijing Normal University, working with patients who already had electrodes implanted deep in their brains for headache therapy, measured neural activity during a perception task. The participants saw a faint icon flash on a screen, designed so they'd consciously notice it only about half the time. When the participants became aware of the icon, a specific set of structures lit up first. Not the outer cortex, but the intralaminar and medial nuclei of the thalamus, buried deep in the center of the brain. These thalamic nuclei activated before the prefrontal cortex and appeared to drive its response. When the participants didn't notice the icon, same stimulus, same eyes, same retina, those deep structures stayed quiet. The thalamus, it turns out, isn't just a relay station, it's a gate. It decides what gets promoted to consciousness and what gets buried. And that gate opens or closes based on criteria the conscious mind has no access to. You aren't choosing what to perceive. Something beneath you is choosing for you. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is the part where legitimate science starts bordering territory that popular culture has badly mangled. And it's worth being precise about what's known, what's debated, and what's genuinely open. Predictive processing as a broad framework is widely accepted among neuroscientists. The brain generates models, compares them to input, updates on error signals. That architecture is well supported by decades of data. Where agreement fractures is on the deeper question, just how much of perception is fabricated. On one side, there are researchers who lean toward what you might call the dreaming while awake position. Anil Seth is among them. In this view, the brain is fundamentally a generative organ. It produces experience, and sensory data merely sculpts it. Consciousness is always at its root a kind of dream. Waking life is a dream tethered by the senses. Cut the tether, and you get nighttime dreaming. Loosen it, and you get psychosis or hallucination. On the other side, you have the ecological perception tradition, rooted in the work of psychologist J.J. Gibson. Gibson argued that the environment itself is extraordinarily rich in structured information, patterns of light, texture gradients, acoustic arrays, and that brains evolved not to simulate the world, but to resonate with its structure directly. Under this view, perception is less of an internal reconstruction and more of an attunement. The brain doesn't need to guess because the information is already out there, pre-organized by physics. Neither camp has won, and both have awkward data they struggle to explain. The predictive processing camp has a hard time with how perception sometimes seems too fast and too accurate for a top-down prediction cycle. The ecological camp has a hard time with illusions, hallucinations, and the fact that identical stimuli can produce radically different conscious experiences depending on context, expectation, and attention. Then there's the evolutionary argument, and this one lands differently. Donald Hoffman, a cognitive scientist at UC Irvine, formalized something called the fitness beats truth theorem. Using evolutionary game theory, his team ran simulations, organisms that perceive the world accurately versus organisms that perceived only what was useful for survival. Across a wide range of conditions, the accuracy-tuned organisms went extinct. The fitness-tuned organisms survived. Hoffman's conclusion is radical. Natural selection does not favor veridical perception, meaning perception that maps truthfully onto reality. It favors useful perception, an interface, like the icons on a computer desktop. The blue folder icon isn't shaped like the actual transistor configuration storing your file. It doesn't need to be. It just needs to guide your behavior effectively. If Hoffman is right, and his math holds up even if his broader philosophical conclusions remain debated, then the relationship between human experience and physical reality may be far more tenuous than anyone assumed. Not slightly off, structurally different, and the guess is old, evolutionarily ancient, shaped by pressures that have nothing to do with understanding the nature of the universe, and everything to do with spotting ripe fruit, detecting predators, and reading the intentions of other primates. The perceptual system sitting behind your eyes was not designed for truth. It was designed for survival. And those two goals, it turns out, come apart far more often than anyone expected. The biologist Jakob von Uexküll introduced a concept in 1934 that neuroscience has spent nearly a century catching up to. He called it Umwelt, the perceptual world unique to each species. A tick, Uexküll observed, lives in a universe defined by exactly three stimuli: the scent of butyric acid from mammalian skin, the warmth of blood temperature, and the tactile sensation of hair. That's its entire reality. Not a simplified version of our reality, a completely different one, constructed by its biology, enclosed by its senses. Humans have their own Umwelt. Ours is wider, certainly richer in many dimensions, but it is still bounded, still species-specific, still blind to the vast majority of physical processes unfolding in the same space we occupy. And what makes us unusual, perhaps uniquely so, is that we figured this out. We built instruments that listen beyond our ears: radio telescopes, gravitational wave detectors, particle colliders. We designed mathematics that described structures no human brain could visualize: 11-dimensional manifolds, quantum superpositions, the curvature of space-time. We did something no tick, no eagle, no whale ever did. We looked at the walls of our Umwelt and realized they were walls, but we have not climbed over them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Every instrument we build is still interpreted by a brain running the same ancient software. Every equation is still comprehended through a nervous system that evolved for a very specific, very provincial purpose: staying alive on a particular planet, in a particular atmosphere, under a particular star. And this brings up something that doesn't get discussed enough. If your experience is a curated reconstruction, if every moment of consciousness is a heavily edited neural broadcast, then memory is a reconstruction of a reconstruction. You remember not what happened, but what your brain modeled as having happened, filtered again through whatever state you're in at the time of recall. Neuroscience has confirmed this repeatedly. Every act of remembering is an act of subtle rewriting. The emotional tone shifts. Details sharpen or fade based on current relevance. The original signal is long gone. What remains is a palimpsest, layer over layer of interpretation, with the source material buried somewhere beneath. Your past, like your present, is a neural best guess. And your sense of self, the continuous coherent you that seems to persist from morning to night, from childhood to now, is assembled from these guesses, stitched together from fragmentary perceptions and reshaped memories, smoothed by a brain that prizes narrative consistency over raw accuracy. This doesn't make the self an illusion exactly. It makes it something more interesting, a construction so effective, so seamless, so metabolically efficient, that it feels like the most obvious, undeniable thing in the universe. The brain's greatest trick isn't hiding reality from you. It's making the alternative, the constructed version, feel more solid than stone. Here's what I keep coming back to. You are sitting somewhere right now, reading or listening, and the room around you feels solid, present, obvious. The light looks like it belongs to the surfaces it touches. The sounds feel like they come from specific places in space. Your body feels like it ends where your skin ends. None of that is given to you raw. All of it is a construction, assembled in the dark, behind a quarter-second delay by a 3-pound organ running on the caloric equivalent of a dim light bulb. And that construction is so masterfully done, so flawlessly integrated, that it takes decades of scientific work to even notice the seams. 11 million signals arrive every second. You get 50, and from those 50 you built a life, a world, an entire sense of what's real. I'm not sure whether to call that a limitation or the most extraordinary act of creation any biological system has ever pulled off. Maybe it's both. It's probably both.